Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is Nathan Ware with Rain Networks. We're excited to get our webinar kicked off here. We've got a really fun webinar for you today. Many of you that have been on our webinars here at Rain Networks in the past know that we're often doing webinars kind of more product focused. And today we're really going to give you a webinar with a different flavor because we're going to be doing more of an industry focused webinar. An industry that we are getting a lot of feedback from our partner base or reseller base that they have that they're kind of intrigued with, and so we're gonna talk about some interesting stuff today. With us today is a gentleman named Harry Brelsford. Harry, thank you so much for taking the time out to do this webinar with us today.
Well, you're welcome, sir. And as you can see in the photo, I'm on the road. Just finished the Acronis conference in Miami. This is my Florida luck.
Yeah. Harry is always on the road. Some of you may know Harry. He has been in this industry for a very long time, and many of you might know Harry from his background in SMB Nation. Boy, I remember meeting Harry for the first time back in the kind of Windows Small Business Server days. Boy, that seems like so long ago, but Harry really pioneered kind of that whole user base, and a lot of you may have been members of SMB Nation way back in the day. So Harry still has SMB Nation, but now has a new organization called 420 MSP. He has a book that he's authored on the subject of the cannabis industry, and so Harry's joining us today to kind of give us his thoughts on where technology is going with the cannabis industry, and maybe how it's going to affect all of your businesses, maybe how you can capitalize on what's happening in this industry. So Harry, why don't you give everybody just like a quick bio and background of yourself so that they kind of know where you're coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've done a good job of it, but been in Seattle, been in tech well over well, not well over, but 30 years. Rode the server wave, and then Nathan, what happened is Small Business Server was announced end of life in mid 2012, which again is actually quite a while ago. And ever since then, our partner community, our MSP community, they've been looking for a new business model, and many have found it, right? Scaling and automation and things we know to be true in the industry, but people consistently came up to me and said, "What's next, right? What's the next great thing?" And that's what led me to the research in the cannabis vertical, technology specifically. And as you see on the screen, the sort of the reason we're here, and I think we'll cover over the next hour, is why does the MSP need to pay attention to the cannabis industry? And then Nathan, just yesterday, Sherry Coleman out of Reno, Nevada, asked the second question in sort of a different way. She's like, well, how can I break into this industry? And so that raises the bigger question of what type of businesses exist in the cannabis industry. Is that makes sense, Nathan? That there's a lot of entry points.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different types of businesses. So there's a lot of different businesses that maybe the managed service provider out there would need to kind of connect up with and kind of understand those businesses so that they can connect up with them in the right manner.
Yeah, and just this morning, I've already put a couple hours in. I'm attending an all-day online summit from the commercial insurance business. And folks, after this, you're certainly welcome to Google the Insuring Cannabis Summit 2019. It's free, goes on for another 5 or 6 hours. You're welcome to hop on board that. But Nathan, the point is that this is a big ecosystem. I liken it to, what type of businesses exist. Well, it's like oil field services, right? People in oil would think it's just roughnecks doing the drilling. Well, that's not true. There's security firms, there's catering, there's housing, right? Oil field services is a big industry. And I just put this example up and encourage people to, after we're done, maybe pop into this thing, because commercial insurance, right? That's another avenue. And you as the MSP could pick up insurance clients with a twist. So there you go, Nathan.
Yeah. What are some of these? So in the categories, you've got growers, right? You've got retail shops. What are some of the other categories?
Yeah, so in my mind, there's really four categories. So there's the supply chain, which starts at the beginning with the growers. Then you have the processors or manufacturers in the middle, where they take the flower and either use science to come up with different varietals or make edibles or make oils and lotions and medical type solutions. And then you have the dispensaries. And the dispensaries are a storefront, typically a retail storefront. They behave like a retail store with a twist. I would offer they're acting very much like a combination of a pharmacy with all the regulation and measurement and expertise, but they're also acting like a high end wine shop. You go to your wine shop, the gentleman says, I have a new red wine, and I'd encourage you to pair it with sea salt chocolate. And so you're looking for that gentleman to or lady to make recommendations on the purchase at the retail level. So those are the three elements of the supply chain. But then there's the fourth, which again is what this slide kind of alludes to, is the services industry. So you have CPAs niching on the cannabis vertical. There's specific regulations. You have law firms niching. You have publishers. You have the insurance industry. You certainly have security, right? That there would literally be firms that specialize in armored car services to transport the cash. And Nathan, those are kind of the big four categories, and it's in particular that fourth category of other services that's still being defined. I mean, dude, you name it, man. There's John Deere
Yeah.
tractors. There's you name it.
Yeah.
They're involved, if that makes sense.
Well, and I'm assuming it's different in different places. So like we're in kind of a unique perspective of this because we're both in the state of Washington. And so we have maybe a little bit ahead of some of the other states. But so when did all of this kind of kick off here? This is like what, about a 5 year old or so industry, 5 to 7 year old industry? What do you feel like
Yeah,
is the
yeah, no, that's exactly right. The legalization was 2012, and there is I wish I could draw the finance term, but it amounts to basically duration. So 2012, it was legalized, but typically it's 18 months before the product becomes available on the market because they have to put in the supply chain, the regulations. Just because the voters approved something in November of 2012, that does not mean a dispensary opens the next day. Right. It takes about a year and a
hmm
half.
yeah.
And when I get to the slide of the 11 legal states, I'll give a shout out in particular to Michigan and Illinois is probably the hottest opportunities. But yeah, it's 7 years legal in Colorado and Washington, and let's just say maybe 5 years practical in those two states, and then everybody flowed.
Well, and maybe this is a good lead in to talk about like, what states are doing what. And I'm kind of surprised, like considering we have election year coming up next year, that there's not more of like a national movement going on. I don't know if that's ever
Yeah.
going to happen, but Washington, where we obviously kind of have the full meal deal out here, but how many states are like where Washington is, where we have like retail,
Yep.
type stuff?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me knock out a couple of fun facts, and I do
Okay.
have a slide on that. So the fun facts, folks. What we're trying to answer that first question: why should an MSP care about the cannabis vertical? So a couple of fun facts to arm you with today. So we have uh, a lot of people don't know this, but the recreational cannabis market is significantly larger than the medical market, and that may reverse itself someday with increased legalization and research. Research is limited because cannabis is a Schedule One drug akin to heroin at the federal level, so research funds are hard to get. But once that pops, Nathan, cannabis has a place in palliative care for pain management, nausea, and appetite, that kind of stuff. Sales last year, 10 billion. grow operations, the largest in Colorado, 34 acres. Now, folks, write that down or make a mental note, 34 acres. I'm going to show you what the value of an acre is. Industry employs 250,000 people. For a real good time, go to Glassdoor. I'd actually encourage you to go to Indeed.com is where I did my research. But according to Glassdoor, people are making what they're worth. Now, if you go to Indeed and type in cannabis and do the state of Washington, Nathan, it's hundreds of job openings. It's unbelievable. And then I'll skip over the arrest and part of the Nathan, part of the challenge with increased legalization as advocates are fighting for people who have been arrested to get their records expunged, and that is actually holding up forward progress. That's kind of a backward view. We'll touch that in our 3-part series another day. Fun facts. Lower right, I'm going to say cell C8 in Excel terms. Cumulative revenue to Colorado, 1.1 billion. So even conservatives are now excited about this in Colorado, and Washington State resembles this. We've also crossed $1 billion. Now, I told you to remember those 38 acres in Colorado. Nathan, this is really cool. Wheat would yield $232 per acre. Cannabis yields 1.1 million per acre. Now we're talking, right? This is where I want you guys to get excited about.
Wow.
Yeah, this is the real deal. So the value chain is incredible. And just guys, put it in perspective that a lot of us are still a little fussy about the value chain in IT. You know, we were server side, we're making coin and reboot. You had to go in and put in patches and do reboots. And then came cloud, and it devalued the value chain. It's almost, Nathan, it's almost the opposite. Our acres were over 1 million with servers, and with cloud, the value has decreased. Right, the business models have changed. Cloud is just so efficient. So, folks, this is a view of a very high value chain. We'll get through another couple fun slides and then get to the legalization and Nathan's questions. Quick view of forecast for recreational medical. Medical's light blue, shows the proportion of revenue between the two. More importantly, 2023, you know, we're basically going from 10 billion to 30 billion by 2023. Those are real numbers. And again, the infrastructure to support that from a technology view is not only critical, but it's comprehensive. I mean, it's a real opportunity. Quick shout out, the book, center photo amongst my other books. Avail yourself at 420msp.com. We're going to talk about the Colorado event a little bit more later. All right, Nathan. Now we're getting to your question. I'm answering your question. So
Yeah, because this is really like that growth that you mapped out there to 2023. Part of that is like new states coming on board, right?
It is. And you know, Nathan, thank goodness it's coming on slowly. 2 reasons. One is, Mr. and Mrs. MSP, you're not too late. Okay, we are at the beginning of this, so you're in no way too late. Number 2, the new states learn from the other states' mistakes. And so that's very interesting in that, you know, people are learning from the Washington and Colorado experience. That's exactly what California did, is they looked at what Oregon, Washington, and Colorado did. So when they came online, they had the benefit of that history. But this is what 10 billion looks like. Now, let me give you a little bit better view of the different statuses. 11 states are legal. Now, Nathan, and here's the dates, by the way, that show when it came out, when it was legalized. To repeat myself, if you go to Colorado and you go to the state of Washington and you see 2012, yes, that's when it became legal, but it was clearly another year, 18 months, 24 months before availability. And then, Nathan, in our field, what we want to use is the nomenclature of adult use laws. So fully legal, typically known as recreational. The proper nomenclature, because we are a serious business and we are overcoming identity issues and stigmas. So the proper way to talk about this is adult use laws, if that makes sense. And Nathan, it hits it head on politically in a couple of fronts that in no way are we, promoting the consumption of cannabis. We're just capitalizing on the opportunity. And we certainly would not want to promote the consumption of cannabis below the age of 21. So, ergo the new language. um, Shout out to Illinois and shout out to Michigan is the two hottest opportunities because it's a green field. So what you're seeing in the state of Washington, which I know best, is yes, don't get me wrong, there's obviously opportunity, but these firms have had the doors open for a while. So Nathan, a lot of times you're going to be coming into someone in the cannabis supply chain as an MSP, and you're going to be displacing somebody, right? It could be the son-in-law knows computers. It could be an in-house IT person knows computers. Harry, we already have a point of sale system that, you know what, Harry, we're not entirely happy with the POS, but we also don't want to go through a migration. So Nathan, nothing you've never seen before in what I would call the secular business community.
Right.
Um, but boy, you go to Illinois in particular, and close by Michigan, and you were talking greenfield. And boy, howdy, that's where I like to be in business. Any thoughts,
So,
Nathan?
well, yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about these kind of. So, run me through. You mentioned earlier the four types. So we had the dispensary.
Correct.
What were the other three types again?
Yeah, we'll go back up the supply chain. So the
Yeah.
dispensaries at the end, and then we go
Yeah.
upstream to midpoint, and midpoint is going to be the processors and the manufacturers. And
Yeah.
then we go to the start of the supply chain, and it's the growers. And then what I would do if you're kind of mapping out little squares, so that would be
Mm-hmm.
3 squares with arrows. Now put a big circle around those squares, and the fourth would be the infrastructure or the support.
Yeah.
Law firm, accounting, architect. I've met an architect who specializes in gorgeous dispensary design. Nathan, it's all that.
So let's take a grower, for example, because some people on this call may not have a picture of what one of those businesses look like. What does the technology look like at a grower? Like, how big are these companies? Do they have servers? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. So first of all, it depends on the state, and I'm going to say Colorado is yes, Colorado. You have to grow inside a greenhouse. And in the state of Washington, you can grow outside. So there's all these regulations. So right there, the physical appearance would vary. And then number two, there's an interesting thing about the growers is there's an MSP in Central California who's often featured at the Channel Pro summits. I'll talk about that on upcoming events. Luis Alvarez, and he served wine growers in California. And Nathan, he was able to easily pivot his business model to cannabis because it acted the same as growing grape is to growing the flower. And so with that, you're bringing IoT and drones because you want to be able to inspect the crop, you want to be able to maintain the crop. You need to use RFID or barcode to manage the crop and have traceability. And then the IoT component could also be Jenny and I have talked to a firm in the lighting business that's out of Boston, and they're aggressively entering the cannabis field. And the IoT component, Nathan, would be the sensors that are in the soil for moisture. And that would be a function of lighting, right? Because too much light's going to dry out the flower in the soil.
Yeah.
So that's what a grower opportunity looks like. In addition to 365, email, PowerPoint, SharePoint,
Yeah.
Outlook. It's all that. It's it's
I
it's
mean,
a
they have to track, because don't they have to report to the states what they're growing? So they have to track their volume and all that stuff very closely, right?
yeah, every single
Yeah.
stalk of the
So
flower.
there's a database there, probably a server of some sort. So you've got pretty intense technology requirements there. So let's go down now to this manufacturer guy. So this next guy down, what does one of those businesses look like? Is it 5 people,
Yeah.
50 people?
It all the above. It can be quite large. And what you're seeing in Canada, and we'll have a slide about Canada in a few slides, but what you're seeing there is because it's federally legal, you have Corona beer. Corona has made
Yeah.
a significant multi-billion-dollar investment in this sector. So one would say Corona is basically a manufacturer, right? They're taking what the farmer grew, the wheat and the hops, and they're manufacturing beer. Corona doesn't directly sell beer. It goes to a distributor and out to the store. So use that as your visualization as to what a processor or manufacturer looks like. And they can be quite large in terms of their employment base. Now, let me give you a little bit better example that people will relate to. Hanu is a edible manufacturer down in Southwest Washington that makes peanut butter cups and s'mores and that kind of thing. And Hanu did a couple of things. So they're a commercial kitchen, right? They're a bakery, a very secure bakery. And Nathan, two things happened with Hanu. One is their chocolates are so popular that they actually now manufacture non-infused chocolates that can be bought at a store, right? Like a sea salt chocolate. So they operate in a couple of different markets based on their reception. But here's an interesting story. They stopped producing for a while. They outgrew their existing manufacturing facility in Southwest Washington and had to move to a new facility. And because of the complex regulation, they had to get re-permitted at the new facility. It wasn't like, Nathan, it's almost like a liquor license, right? A liquor license on a
Right.
corner in a neighborhood has to, you can't be within 1,000 feet of a church or school, that kind of thing. And so when you move, you would have to reapply for your liquor license. Well, that had the effect of Hanu disappeared for like 45 days from the marketplace. And then Nathan, here's the good news. Moves are always a demand trigger for MSPs, right? When do people want to upgrade their network? Instead of Cat5, they go to Wi-Fi. Instead of the old-fashioned phone system nobody's happy with, they go to UC, Unified Communicate. And Nathan, moves have always been a demand trigger. So,
Oh yeah. Sure.
yeah, I mean, that's good.
Yeah. Every
Tell you what, let
MSP
me,
service company on this call has helped somebody move their technology, I'm sure, from one building or one office to the other. Yes, absolutely. Really quick here
tell you
before we
what,
move on to the next question, let
yeah,
me just throw out to everybody we've got about 10 more minutes in today's webinar. This is going to be a 3-part series, guys. When Harry and I kind of dreamed up doing this webinar, we just knew we could never pack everything into one session, and we know people prefer smaller sessions and larger sessions, so we're going to do 3 parts, so you'll get an invitation for part 2 soon. And so we got about 10 minutes left. I want to tell everybody, if you got questions for Harry, feel free to use the chat utility in the GoToWebinar, and we'd love to field some questions. But so Harry, we've got the 11 states here. Okay, this is where I was going. So we got the 11 states are legal. Who's next?
yeah. So partially legal. So quickly, because I do want to get to questions. And folks, if we don't get to them, we'll get to them in the next segment. Um, these are medically legal. So this would be people who have a medical card, except for except for, say, number 6, number 10, number 20. Texas law, I actually know number 24 would be CBD oil only. So medical cards, unless they say CBD oil. And then Nathan, the photos. So this is interesting. At the Acronis Global Cyber Summit this week at the Fountain Blue hotel down in Miami Beach, a 5-star, gorgeous. This was a sign in the hallway for their spa. And I was like, wow, I am going to take a photo of that. That here you have arguably a little more conservative hotel, very high end, very nice. Nathan, they're just out there with it in Miami, Florida, that they will massage you with CBD oil. So this is what partially legal states look like. And folks, here's the opportunity. Nathan, a lot of times people will say, well, I'm not one of the 11 states. I get it. I understood. But you might be one of these 27 states, and the numbers changing frequently. So, if you're in Austin, Texas, you indeed can start to look at this industry. And then this is also a pathway towards adult use or full legalization. Next slide, please. We have fully illegal. So if you're in these states, this is going to be tougher. Now, that said, Nathan, you could still be a service provider, right? You could still be an author
Yeah.
who wrote a cannabis business book. You could be a CPA firm. You could be an architect. An architect based in Alabama could certainly drop designs for a retail dispensary, right? That's entirely
Yeah.
legal. That's just an architect. And then finally,
Well,
or go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, we got the 11 guys that are fully legal for adult use, right? So
Right.
then we got the 27 that are in the partial. I mean, if you're on this webinar and you're in one of these 27 states, you should probably be the most excited because you have an opportunity to really catch this at the front end
Yep.
because your state, I mean, it's fair to say, right? If you're in this state, full adult usage is coming, right? This is like they've cracked the door open and soon, right? Wouldn't you say that most of these are going to
Yep.
be full adult usage soon?
Well, I'll give you an example in the 2018 elections. And again, I spend a lot of time here, so I'll just share. But the statewide initiative barely lost in Florida for statewide legalization. And I think part of that is Florida went with DeSantis for governor and a couple of other twists and turns that made Florida, they're a purple state, and in 18 they arguably went a little bit more towards red, and that initiative barely lost. It's on the ballot in 2020. So to your point, Nathan, it will pass in 2020 is my prediction in Florida.
Yeah.
Canada, again, shout out to Canada. Nathan, those are kind of my fun facts. And if you
I had
have some
I had one
questions,
more. I had one more
okay.
question I was going to throw out at you just because I remember seeing a situation happen here in the state of Washington with a business. They were actually a manufacturer. And I remember them really struggling with, like, nobody would give them a bank account, basically. And
Yes,
when they
sir.
wanted to buy stuff, like when they went to uh, Dell or something like that to get a lease on some machines, there was some difficulties there. So, what are you seeing on that end of the business in terms of these guys having money and being able to spend on their technology stuff?
Well, remember, so you're specifically talking about an entity that touches the flower, right? So a CPA and an architect will have no such restrictions on buying 10 new laptops from Dell, right? They're an architect. A grower would have two pathways. Number one, cash. Number two, and we have an MSP down in LA, Josh Weiss, who often gets paid in cash. Um, who's complaining? It's the money's good. And then number two, in the state of Washington, you can utilize state credit unions. So state credit unions are typically at the trade shows in the state of Washington signing up members because they're not federally regulated. So that's a loophole, would be the credit union movement. So there we are. So
Okay.
Nathan,
Interesting.
quickly on events, I know we're starting to bump up on time. Folks, I'm going to get you the deck. I want you to think about December 11th through 13th. Last year was 30,000 attendees. This is the biggest business show in the country. I went. 1,000 vendors, not possible to visit each one in 3 days. 30,000 attendees. This time in Vegas, they have the South and the North Hall. 50,000 attendees projected. And Jack Smith and I, Jack Smith out of Denver, an MSP, Blake Schwank, an MSP out of Colorado Springs, and myself, we're going to do an Airbnb house. And depending on, Nathan, you're invited to join us. Depending on the excitement level, we can get a big house in Vegas. We can have Animal House, split the cost, right? Hey, we have 5 people staying at a house. It's going to be all fun and giggles. We'll go to the conference. And so we're calling it 420 MSP House. I'll be coordinating that. Folks, raise your hand. You can reply back into the email you got, or harryb@smbnation.com, or Nathan's email as well. Jenny, if you could get our emails out in the thank you note tomorrow. Let us know if you would like to stay at 420 MSP House. And as simple as it sounds, if the house is 1,000 a night, we'll split it by 5. We'll split it by 10, whatever it takes. Shows we'll be at next week. I'm at Rad Expo in Portland Wednesday, Thursday. I'm at Lemon Haze Friday. Nathan, shows are starting to get on top of each other very quickly in this industry.
Sure. Yeah.
Channel Pro SMB November 6th. We'll have the 420 booth in Newark. Ingram 1, I'm media, but I am in Denver. So I'm not officially at that show in a 420 MSP capacity, but I am in Denver if anyone wants to get together for a beer fest. And finally, MJ Biz. And Nathan, do we have additional questions with our remaining time?
Well, so we'll talk about this more in parts 2 and 3, but you work directly with MSPs. So like how can an MSP work with you from, like you almost are like a consultant, I guess you would say. Is that kind of the right? How does that work?
Yeah, that's actually a really timely question. So, a couple of ways. Number one is sign up at 420 MSP, take advantage of our free resources, right? I just did an interview this morning. I fitted in, the insurance conference is going on, and I fitted in an interview with Blake Schwank out of Colorado Springs. So, we're streaming content to help you get into this business, number one. Also at the site, you could buy my book. It's a 90-day roadmap on how to enter this vertical. After the first of the year, we're going to have premium content, the good stuff. So 420 MSP will be a conduit for that. And then we're very close to finalizing a business model with Mia Kate Kennedy, who is the editor of my book. Mia Kate is an MSP out of Spokane, Washington, who served cannabis industry players, and she is going to do business coaching, per hour business coaching for this specific vertical. So Nathan, you actually ask a very good question. That's not announced. I'd like to say that's under NDA, although I just shared that information. But Mia Kate will be heading up a business coaching practice for MSPs based on her dual experience.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, so we're going to have part 2 in November. We're going to have part 3 in December. On those, we're going to be talking about some of maybe the regulations that the industry might be looking at. You have been working with a bunch of companies in this industry, so you've seen some of the mistakes that have been made. We'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, we'll talk about, maybe what things are going to look like in maybe 5 years, so that the guys that are on this call can kind of plan and like, hey, this is what I need to be looking for. So we have a whole bunch of topics to cover in part 2 and 3. Again, if you want to get the book, go to 420msp.com. And keep an eye out in your inbox for your invitation to part 2 of our series. Harry, thank you so much for doing this with us today. It
You
was fun.
betcha. Yeah, thank you. It's nice to be on the other side of the aisle. It's fun to be the guest. Thank you, Nathan.
You bet. And special shout out to Jenny, who works at Harry's company, who put all of this together for us. So thank you, Jenny, for organizing this. And everybody, have a great day, and we'll be back with part 2 next month. Have a great day,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.